This is One on One. There he is, Harvey Araton, who is the author of Driving Mr. Yogi, Yogi Berra, Ron Guidry, and Baseball's Greatest Gift. Harvey is also a sports writer with the great lady, New York Times. Good to see you.
Same. Thanks for
As
having me.
a longtime Yankee fan, I appreciate this book, as does Neil Shapiro, our president over at WNET, and lots of other Yankee fans. Yogi and Ron Guidry. I'm sitting there going, what the heck is the connection? Yogi at 87 years young, right? And Guidry. What's the hookup? What's the connection? And why are they so close now?
Well, it goes all the way back to when Ron Guidry was a young pitcher coming up through the Yankee farm system and getting to the major leagues. This is back in the day when George Steinbrenner was just kind of feeling his oats as a Yankees owner. And, you know, it was hell on a young player to kind of make it with the Yankees in those days, and especially for a young pitcher. Well, Guidry was one of these guys who was up on that yo-yo. You know, up one week, down, come up, give up a home run to Yastrzemski, back down. He contemplated quitting at one point.
This is before 25-3.
Yes, well before 25. But it was, when he finally got to the stadium, it turned out that his locker was right next door to Yogi's.
Right.
And not only was Yogi, you know, he was a coach at that time for Billy Martin, but Guidry, who grew up in Louisiana in the Cajun country, grew up a Yankees fan. His mom was a huge Yankees fan, and they would sit on the couch together and watch the Yankees whenever they were in the World Series and whatnot. So the names Mantle, Berra, Ford, they meant something to young Ron Guidry. And he really was looking for someone to kind of become his confidant and mentor. And Yogi, who is not the most loquacious man, as we know, at first kind of, you know, held him off a little bit, but slowly he realized how needy Guidry was. And he started to take him under his wing, and he started to work with him, talk to him about what worked for him, his slider, you know, throw your slider until they can't hit it. His credo on baseball is not what you get today with the, you know, computer analysis. It's very simple.
Yep.
But for a young pitcher coming through the Yankee organization at that time, and the pressure that would, you know, be on you whenever you took the mound, right. To have a guy like Yogi Berra trying to help you keep it simple was a great thing for Guidry. He never forgot that, and that's where the relationship begins, really as a mentorship.
But there's a huge gap. By the way, go out and get the book, folks. We're going to leave out a lot of details, obviously. Harvey's book is called Driving Mr. Yogi, by Yogi Berra and Ron Guidry. So there's a big gap, obviously. Mm-hmm. They reconnect how?
Well, as we know, Yogi stayed away from the Yankees for 14 years. I mean, he was...
Little rift.
He was, you know, fired as manager in 1985 through an intermediary. It wasn't so upsetting to him that he actually got fired. He'd been fired before. But it was the way George did it, through a general manager, Clyde King. And Yogi vowed he would never step foot in Yankee Stadium again for as long as George owned the team. Right. Well, 14 years go by. Susan Waldman, who's now the broadcaster for the Yankees, at that time is the reporter.
On the radio side.
On the radio side. At that time is the reporter for WFAN. She's got a good relationship with Steinbrenner. Has the idea of having a show at the Yogi Berra Museum, which is opening on the campus of Montclair State University that winter. And she asks George, would he come up and do a show with Yogi? In effect, would you come up to New Jersey from Tampa in the middle of the winter and apologize to Yogi? George argues with her on the phone, which tells Susan, I know George well enough that if he didn't want to do it, he would just hang up the phone and that would be it. Anyway, George gets talked into it. He comes up to New Jersey. He apologizes to Yogi. And Yogi goes back to spring training the following year, 2000. And now the Yankees have switched training bases from Fort Lauderdale to Tampa at that point. And so a lot of the familiar surroundings that Yogi knew are gone. Joe Torre's there as manager. He had a long-standing relationship with Joe, Zimmer, but other people in the organization, right. Where to stay. So
but
Guidry goes, he hears that that Yogi's coming in,
yes.
And he takes it upon himself to go to the airport to pick him up.
He initiates that.
He initiates it out of his memories, his loyalty, his love for Yogi.
Goes to the airport.
Goes to the airport, picks him up. As they're driving to the hotel, owned by Steinbrenner, Guidry says to Yogi, hey, what are you doing for supper tonight? And Yogi goes, nothing. I got a place. And this is where the relationship starts to turn from mentor to friend, and then in the later years, as Yogi ages, to actually being his caretaker. Because Yogi is now 87 years old.
Yes.
And he has gone to spring training every year since, as a special guest instructor. But the last several years, Yogi has slowed down.
Yeah, put up the picture of the two of them guys. There it is, right there. See that, Harvey? There it is.
Yeah, that's them in Cooperstown, actually, last summer. And Guidry does things for Yogi that have to be seen to be believed. He's like a dutiful son. It's a love and a companionship that is special in that it's more than multi-generational. It is, to me, it says everything about what we all need and will hope to have when we get to be Yogi's age.
But I got to ask you, Harvey, a couple minutes there left. Wish I had more time. By the way, go out and get the book, Driving Mr. Yogi. Why did you decide to write about this?
Well, initially it was a story. I mean, I had heard about the relationship through Dave Kaplan, who's the director of Yogi's Museum,
right.
old friend of mine and colleague at the Daily News. And he told me about it, and I went down. Nobody had ever written about it before. I went down, talked to Guidry, who initially did not want to talk about it. He's a very private guy, and he's loyal to Yogi, and did not want to be seen as looking for publicity for what he does for Yogi. But when I told him, I live in Montclair, where Yogi lives, my kids have grown up at that museum, he loosened up. We talked about it. The story wound up on A1 of the New York Times. And from there, we just got, the response was so overwhelming. And I'm not talking about just Yankees fans. Red Sox fans, people writing in, I've hated the Yankees my whole life, but for the 10 minutes it took to read the story, I loved them too. It was a sweet, poignant story. And the natural thing to do seemed to be to expand it into a book form.
And Driving Mr. Yogi, obviously a play on Driving Miss Daisy, right?
On the book and the movie, but also the longer I worked on the book, the more I realized there was a double meaning, at least for me. And the second part of it is what drives Yogi Berra to continue at his age to want to be down in spring training, to want to share that time with Guidry, to be around Jeter and Rivera and all these guys, and it's all about hanging on to that title as the greatest living Yankee.
Well, as a obsessed Yankee fan, hopefully in a good way, I'm convinced you don't have to be a Yankee fan. You can even be, as you said, a Red Sox fan. You don't have to be a fan of baseball, just a fan of human relationships to appreciate this book. You've done a good thing, Harvey. I appreciate it, and appreciate your reporting for the New York Times every day.
Thank you, Steve.
Thank you.
Pleasure to be here.
This special edition of One-on-One with Steve Adubato is brought to you from the Tisch WNET studios at Lincoln Center. Funding has been provided by Hackensack University Medical Center, Bloomfield College, offering small classes and big opportunities since 1868, New Jersey Manufacturers Insurance Group, auto insurance, homeowners insurance, and banking under the principle of stewardship, and by Verizon Communications. Promotional support provided by The Record, North Jersey's trusted source, and NorthJersey.com. Transportation provided by Airbrook Limousine, serving the metropolitan New York, New Jersey area. One-on-One with Steve Adubato has been produced in partnership with St. Joseph's Healthcare System.